Hello and welcome back to Dry Conversations. I'm Whitney Cowell, your host. Joining me today is Dan Reiss, the SVP of Partnerships at Manifest. Dan, it is so good to have you on. Welcome.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's great to join this.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you reached out. I love Manifest. I love the team. And I now love that I have somebody that I have a lot of things in common with who's with the organization.
And we both like coffee. I mean,
we sure do.
I'm already up to number 3. Just finish it. So,
well, I would love to kind of dive right into it because you reached out and said, that you could totally relate to some of the content that I was publishing, and said that you kind of had your own story. And so I would love to just maybe start from the beginning, or maybe not the very beginning, but the beginning of what brought you here on the show today.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sober now. Next week will be 7 years. And it's funny too, because I think a few years ago, it would still be fairly taboo to talk about it, especially on LinkedIn. I mean, who'd have thunk it? Like someone's going to talk about a sobriety journey on LinkedIn, and all of a sudden, more and more people are talking about it, whether it's Dooner being very public about it or other folks in the industry. And so it's like, you know what? People, I talk about it all the time now in a conversation with somebody, even when we're talking about the show and some of the activations. I mentioned that we have our mocktail lounge because I'm sober and I'm not the only one there. So like, how can we make the show more inclusive and not just here's a soda water and call it a day? And it's getting sober in the beginning was something that like almost felt shameful to say, oh, I went to AA or I had a problem. Or now it's like, I was a degenerate alcoholic. I mean, and here we are. Like, it's not a big deal anymore. It would have been a bigger deal if I didn't do anything about it.
Sure.
And, I wouldn't, if I didn't stop when I stopped. And like, and we'll get into the whole 12-step journey and all that too. But like, I struggle with higher powers. I don't believe in God. That's just my personal belief. So, but I do believe that like kind of things happen for a reason. And if I didn't get my shit together when I did, I wouldn't be where I am today, basically.
Right.
So it's almost like the butterfly effect, if you will.
And I think that's a totally relatable thing. I mean, for some of us, are hitting that like rock bottom is very devastating. And for others, like myself, I had a very short drinking career, but it escalated so quickly that I'm not really sure what one more year would have held for me. I don't know that I would actually be here to talk about it. And like you said, so many people, it is such a taboo thing, but so many people are impacted by it. And so that's why we're here, right? Is to say like, you're not alone. There are several of us that have faced addiction and are living to tell the tale on the other side, and are more than willing to share that tribal knowledge if it'll help another person.
And also sober living now, it's becoming more mainstream, whether it's coming from a place of alcoholism or addiction, or just, I don't feel like drinking tonight. And so look, I drink, and again, to each their own, I drink NA beers. I'm okay cooking with alcohol or drinking like a seed lip or something like non-alcoholic. I'm okay with that. That doesn't trigger me. But I appreciate that companies are now evolving to also address that market and realize that, hey, like there's a market for this. We want to make it more inclusive, which I know is a taboo word nowadays, more so than alcoholism. And so they're taking the steps to have folks like us have a place to be. I mean, even where I live now, there's a few towns, whether it's in Philly and other areas in South Jersey, that have NA bars, like NA there's mocktail lounges now that are opening up that are 100% alcohol free, and that's awesome.
Yeah, we actually have one of those in Chattanooga. I saw it for the first time a few weekends ago and thought that's really cool. And the drinks looked really fun.
It is. Even like when my wife and I go out, and she's not a big drinker, she'll oftentimes like try my mocktail. And she's like, wow, this is better than what I have. But yeah, going kind of back to the beginning. I mean, when I was young, I started my career, I was in the military when I was younger. I spent 4 years in the Navy, traveled a lot. So drinking with the guys then and there, again, not a big deal. Moved back home. My parents would usually have a drink or two in the evening just to kind of unwind. And eventually I started joining them, and I would just have a drink. Not a big deal.
Sure.
living on my own. It started to progress there, uh, kind of on and off, where I have a drink, and then it's on the weekend. I'm going to have 2 drinks, and then 3 drinks, and oh, it's Saturday. I don't have anything to do today, so I'm just going to go drink the day away and order some pizza. I wasn't really harming anyone but myself at the time, because I was still functioning. I was still going to work. I was still, making great sales. Uh, I scaled it back for a while too. It was something where I still was, to a degree, in control.
Yeah.
Um, my last career before I joined Manifest, I was with another event company. I'm not going to name names. Is where it just kind of really ramped up. I was still living at home with my parents at the time, commuting into New York. Um, I would still, I don't think I realized how bad it got at that time. And I would wake up in the morning nauseous and
Mm-hmm.
is there something wrong with me? Is this normal? Like, why do I feel like crap? And I'm driving to the bus stop at 6:30 in the morning. But it was still fun. Again, I was still functioning.
Right.
I met my now wife at the time too. We moved in together into her studio in the city. It progressed there, where I would just keep a bottle of vodka in the freezer. That was my drink of choice. And in the evening, I would have a drink or two and go to bed. It was still manageable. Or maybe I was just telling myself it was, but I was still functioning, wasn't really missing work. I would go to events, and this is the crazy thing too. I would be traveling to a trade show. On the way to the hotel from the airport, I would have the Uber taxi driver stop at a liquor store so I can get a bottle, in the room for that night. And just as soon as I got the hotel, like, great, I could start drinking, because I was a solo drinker. If I was out, I could have 1 or 2 drinks and be fine. But then as soon as I was by myself, party's on, and I would just keep going. So I would start missing networking events, or showing up to something and people would say, "Oh, here's some gum. You smell like alcohol." It's like, oh crap! But I'm still functioning, still doing my job, still making good money. Everything's fine. We moved to Jersey City. We got married. I mean, I still even remember my wedding day. I was drinking the night before. I was kind of detoxing on my wedding day, and why do I feel like shit? Maybe it's just nerves. Oh no, it's really the alcohol talking. It really started kind of ramping up after I got married. I think I was just comfortable.
Yeah.
Where I would stop at the liquor store on the way home from work, get a pint or two for the night. I remember one time my wife actually found probably a dozen or so empty pint bottles all around the apartment, and thinking how did I manage to hide all these as well? They were under the mattress, they were here, they were there.
We do that. We're like squirrels. We
seriously
hide away out of sight.
And it's nuts.
Yeah.
But it's at that time too is when it just really kind of went to overdrive. I was starting to call out at work because I was having stomach problems, more like I was just detoxing every day, and waking up in the morning to take a shot, or in the middle of the night, and I'm snoring and she's kicking me, and I'm keeping having to get up to go to the bathroom. I go to work. I vividly remember this, which is also kind of what helps keep me sober, is remembering I was a scumbag. I mean, there was a liquor store around the corner from the office, and I would be watching the clock, oh, okay, 10 o'clock, they open. Cool. I could sneak out for a cigarette and run to the liquor store and buy a nip or two just to get rid of the shakes. And, my doctor prescribed also I forget not Xanax, but some sort of anti-anxiety med, just to help kind of take the edge off, which he probably should have prescribed something more hey, get your ass in detox.
Sure.
But it's, I was on blood pressure meds, I was on heartburn meds, and I'm in my mid-late 30s at this time. And I tried, and my wife knew I had a problem. We had a few fights about it. I went to AA, kind of in and out, and got a sponsor, worked the program a little bit, but then relapsed. Finally, one day was one of my call out of work days. Oh, and this is the really shitty part. I would get dressed, get ready, go to work. I would literally hide around the corner from my building till I watched my wife kind of leave and see her walking, so I could sneak back in the garage and go back upstairs. And it's seriously where is this normal? Like, what
Yeah.
is wrong with you, that you think that this is okay to do? And finally, after one of them, my wife figured something was up. Like, she just knew something was wrong.
Sure.
Um, I didn't until like that last day. Yes, the cat has joined the conversation. I just had a complete breakdown. That was my final bottom, where I forget the exact situation. Like, I think I was texting my wife that I was at home. I wasn't feeling well. She knew something was wrong. I just had a complete breakdown at that point of like, I wanted to stop. And my dad drove up from Central Jersey. We were living in North Jersey, kind of babysat me till she got home. My sister and brother-in-law came over with some pizza later on, and they didn't let me be alone that day.
Mhm.
Um, and I was just like a wreck, just a crying mess. And I'm thinking like, I don't want to feel like this ever again.
Yeah.
Uh, I finally like went to a real meeting like 7 o'clock that next morning, went to work. I felt like shit. Like that entire, I went to a meeting after work too, still felt like shit. But I didn't drink that day. You know, the next day, same thing, still felt like shit. Went to a meeting before, went to a meeting after work. I kind of went through the motions that first week at work of like just existing. But on the third day, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna like, I still feel like crap because I'm detoxing, and I
Yeah.
did it on my own, which is probably not the smartest move.
Your body is sick too. It's not just in your head.
Oh,
Like
I
you've
had
been
to
doing that
shake.
for so long, your body is very sick.
I was taking like valerian root just to kind of like help kind of mellow me out a little bit. I still have those anxiety pills. I'd take like a half a pill just to kind of like balance me out a little bit so I could like function. Finally, I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, I'm gonna shave, I'm gonna clean up a little bit. But after a few days, I'm like, okay, like every day sucked, but it started to suck a little less.
Yeah.
And eventually, like the suck turned to good. And okay, like I feel better now. I feel more normal. Even like after I'll say like a solid 2 weeks, I'm like, all right, I'm starting to feel more like myself again. I'm, getting back to what I like to do. I like to cook. I like started exercising a little bit again too. Just little by little, just it went from shitty to okay, like I feel good again. And I just kept on being consistent on going to meetings, and
Mhm.
I started opening up to a few people also, like my boss at the time, who eventually joined us over here at this company on a different project. And he was great. I mean, like he should have fired me so many times.
Yeah.
Um, the only reason I had a job was because I brought in my numbers, and I was really good at what I did. But he should have fired me. I would have fired me.
Yeah. I
Um,
get that.
if I didn't stop, I would not be here. Like I would be divorced. I wouldn't have kids. I mean, my kids have never seen me take a drink.
That's
Uh,
amazing.
my kids know that like I get up early to work out now. Like I could be trusted to do things. I went from being in debt and like spending all my money on alcohol and crappy food to investing for our kids, and we're planning a vacation to Europe next month, and we're doing all the things. I mean, and in between that time there's been some struggles. Like I I didn't go to bars for a while for outings just to be safe.
Yeah.
Um, and I was just really careful when I was alone to really make sure I was reaching out, because being by myself was when it was the worst. And I mean,
Right.
now I've been working from home for years, and it's only me and my cat right now, or cats, the other one's sleeping somewhere. My wife only works from home 2 days a week. So if this was a few years ago, I'd be worried. Like, can I be trusted to be by myself at home all day? And the answer would be no.
Sure.
And look, I still dig around. I go on BuzzFeed and Reddit, but also I'd rather do that than go drinking. I went to AA. I started working the program. Eventually, like this is not a knock on 12-step programs. I mean, it it works. Just for me, it got a little preachy for my taste. And there was one meeting I would always go to in the West Village. It was at one of the clubhouses, and I loved it. Bunch of old timers there, but there was one sign on the wall that always stood out to me, and I always kind of would use this as my argument. Whenever someone gave me shit about, well, find your higher power or do this, and I look at the sign, I'm like, there's no wrong way to get sober. You know,
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's, I think, a common way, but not the only way.
exactly.
And that's, if you're sober, then and you're emotionally sober and you're mentally sober, not just physically, like I'm not physically falling all over myself because I'm drunk. I think that's a miracle. And I love that saying that there's no one way to get sober, because that is incredibly true.
Yeah, like there's people say like A is the only way. It might be the only way for you. That's
Mhm.
okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Some people need to go to an inpatient program. Some people need meetings. Some people just did it cold turkey.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter. You're sober and you're living your life now. Who cares how you got there?
right.
You know, Solving a math problem. There's sometimes there's more than one way to get to the answer. You got the right answer. You figured it out. What worked best for you, and that's okay.
Yeah.
I have a family member in recovery. He's probably 16, 17 years in the program now, and he's still religious about going because he's just of that personality that can't function without a meeting, can't function without the network, that everything revolves around the program.
Yeah. And I think, to your point, like, we aren't meant to do life alone, much less the things that feel like the hardest parts of life. And for some of us, that is our addiction and walking through recovery. As long as you have people that are in your corner that support that journey, that support you choosing to live that day and to be the best version of yourself that you can be, I think it's really important. And that's, to go back to what you said, which I absolutely love, is that you were trusted. Your kids trust you. They know you as a sober person. And for the longest time, other people didn't trust us. We had no business
Oh, yeah.
trusting ourselves and the decisions that we were making. And that comes with time and practice and having grace with yourself. Because as somebody who shortly into their recovery all of a sudden became a remote employee, that was a very scary
Oh,
moment.
yeah.
I was like, I used to think of myself as a ticking time bomb, which is a really sad way to view myself,
Yeah, it's
instead
like,
of
what's going to trigger you that day?
yeah, right. And now I'm back in a role where I am a full-time remote employee, and I love it. I know how to fill my time. I
Mhm.
know the right things to do. I know the wrong things to do. And it feels really good, kind of that first moment when somebody, voices that they trust you, or you do something where you're like, man, this is a totally different version of me that feels so much more at home than who I was before.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even now, there's alcohol in my house. There's a few six packs in the basement from like barbecues that we've had that people like left their leftovers here. 7 years ago, that would not be a good thing. Right now, they're sitting there collecting dust. Like, oh, we're having a barbecue here. Let me bring this up from the basement and finish it. Like, some. So like thinking, but that is what works for me. Like that is other
Yeah.
people that could be a trigger. Um, and that's I think an important thing to realize too, that everyone's sobriety, everyone's recovery is different. You know,
Yeah.
I think that it's fair to say that in the end, we all felt the same way, and that's kind of what got us to get sober. Um, but how we stayed sober and what works and doesn't work for us is different for everybody. And as long as you're living your life, you're staying sober, you're being a good person, you're not being an asshole and a scumbag anymore, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Other people get triggered by different things. I mean,
Right.
um, if I make like a mocktail, I don't mind using bitters, which I know are alcohol based, but again, like that's not something that's going to hurt my sobriety. And also, if I'm getting drunk on bitters, I've got a bigger problem to worry about.
Yeah.
But it's or maybe a substitute with more coffee, or in my case, I was substituting with eating, which is that was my next thing to get in check. I quit drinking, quit smoking, then let's get healthier and like work out more and like let's get
Right.
into a program and take care of myself. And it's just like I trust myself, my family trusts me. I mean, it's such a different experience from years ago when I'd be the one who would be all sweaty and red-eyed at a family gathering. I look at old photos and like look at my face and like just how I was carrying myself, and it's just such a big difference. And
Yeah.
that it's yeah, and I think for me, just being able to remember those last few days of of alcoholism and how I felt both physically and emotionally, and never wanting to feel that again. I think that's the thing that keeps me sober the most, aside from everything that I have, many of which are material things, but that I don't ever want to be that person again.
Yeah.
And there's challenges. I mean, we like to travel. We want to take our kids on experiences. We want to take them to other countries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, we're going to Portugal in a month. We want to do something like Spain or Italy next year. And like, wow, like all the great wines over there. But you know what? It's okay. I'm going to save those calories for the amazing food that'll be there instead.
Right.
Um, and there's some decent NA wines too, actually. But it's so. Are there sometimes times that I feel like maybe I'm missing out? Yes, but there's a little voice in the back of your head that says, "Well, you could take a sip, but what could happen? It can go one of two ways. You could take a sip and be fine. Or you could take a sip and say, oh shit, here we go again. It's
Yeah.
not worth it."
Right. And if my memory serves correctly, it's always going to be that second one.
Oh yeah.
It's never going to be that, oh, it's just fine. It's always going to be the next one and the next. Like the first one is the only one I have control over. The rest, like it's all downhill from there for me.
It really is. And like, then it's like, okay, second one leads to a third, and you just keep going. And, here we go again. And I don't want to be that person again. So yeah, that's kind of my war story.
Yeah. I would love to, and first of all, thank you so much for sharing your story. I think every story matters. I think every story is really important. And I relate to so much. So far, every person that's told something, I'm like, man, I know that feeling. And if I feel that way, I know I'm not the only one, right? But I would love to kind of dive into that advocacy and stigma piece. That's something that we kind of touched on before a little bit. And it definitely was something beforehand that you said that you'd be interested in talking about. And I would love to know what that looks like for you today, because I know you guys have the mocktail lounge at Manifest. That's a really good way to kind of like show up for others that are in recovery.
Yeah. And it's just like, and I think first thinking about the stigma that, I mean, one, it's your own sense of kind of personal pride as well too. Like, do I want to share with people that I'm an alcoholic? And honestly, like, I don't even really say I'm an alcoholic anymore. I just say I'm sober at this point. Like, I don't feel the need to give myself that label, because at this point in my life, I consider myself a sober person more than I consider myself an alcoholic. But I think just not being afraid to just talk about it with someone, because if it comes up in a conversation, whether it's because you posted something on LinkedIn or somebody, like maybe I'm in a few groups on Facebook, whether like a local food scene or like a fitness group, people post something about there, I'm not afraid to add my voice at a discussion, because how is that going to hurt me? If anything, it might help somebody else.
Right.
And honestly, like, if you want to take issue with the fact that I had a problem and I got help for it, and you want to have a problem with that, fuck you, dude. Like, sorry, I don't have time for that. I mean, yeah, you can edit that if you want or not. I don't care.
No, I'll leave it. I told you say it, we're posting it.
I respect people more for acknowledging something and doing something about it, because I was that scumbag who kept on denying that there was something wrong. So why should I now hide about that when maybe my voice could help somebody else?
Right. And there are some people that are like, they don't feel comfortable sharing, but they don't want to feel alone, right? And so those of us that do feel comfortable sharing, that have maybe even just the time and the experience to say, like you said, I identify as a sober person, so I'm very comfortable disclosing what that means and how I came to that conclusion and what that looked like for me. And for anybody that has a problem with that, because, therapy used to be a taboo topic, and mental health, and it just takes people showing up. And like you said, if people are offended by it, then at the end of the day, what that means to me is that you're offended that I'm still alive today. And I just don't have room for that.
And you never know who you're going to meet. I mean, even at Manifest, I was having conversations with a few of my customers, and we were talking about the mocktails with one of them. I mentioned how, like, well, here's why we have it. And the person was like, oh, that's amazing. I'm 10 years sober. I'm like, oh, I would never would have known that had we not like started this conversation. Like, it's not, and this doesn't apply to everyone, but at least like to me, it's not a big deal. It's not a big deal to say you're sober, or to say whatever you want, or it's let me rephrase that. It's not a big deal to not drink.
Yeah.
Like, whatever your reason for it, it's not a big deal to not drink, to not do drugs. I mean, we're not kids anymore. I mean, I'm gonna be 44 this summer. I just try to cut the grays out, but I could put some video. I should not have put on the higher video on this, because then you can see everything. But um, gone are the days of like, oh, try this. All the kids are doing it. Like, no, like, I don't want to do that.
Mhm.
And when my kids are older, I'll have the appropriate conversations with them too. And what is that going to look like?
Right.
You know, I want them to be able to come to me about it, because even my parents' generation was more that silent generation of my dad, more so than my mom. That like sometimes it was like my dad's opinion was just like, well, suck it up and get over it, until I realized like there was like more to it than just suck it up and get over it.
Yeah.
And I see some of that myself sometimes too. Like, it's a little bit more than just walk it off. Um, but if there's somebody else out there who's having a hard time, and just I'm always happy to talk to somebody. Because there's other people who I know in the industry that have gotten sober, have gone back out and back and forth, and I've seen them throughout the years, and it's like, okay, when you're ready, try it again.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, it's something that I'm not ashamed to be anymore. Like, it's I'd be more ashamed if I was still that person 7 years ago, getting drunk on the couch and missing work, because I would not be in the place I am today with my family, my job, my
Yeah.
my kind of life path. I would not have any of that if I was still, active alcoholism.
Yeah. And I love that. Like you said, it's just not as big of a deal. It is a big deal in the sense that, like, the choices that you're making and how it's impacting you, and probably how it's impacting a lot of people that love you. Um, but once you're walking that path, it's a part of who we are. And you are probably very similar to me, that like I don't I don't like, oh my gosh, there's a piece of you that's fundamentally broken because you struggled with this thing at some point. And so, that's why, regardless of if you're just sober curious, or if you've been sober for, I know one person's been sober for like 40 years. That's amazing. I don't I don't see them differently as people.
And you never know who you're going to meet too. I mean, I went because at the time I was in New York, so I'd be going to meetings in New York, and you meet some characters there. I met some amazing people there of all walks of life. There were some meetings. I'm gonna not break anyone's anonymity. I mean, there was meetings I go to where there would be a homeless person holding hands with a well-known celebrity, for being as vague as I can, that you would absolutely know, and they'd be holding hands at a meeting.
Yeah.
Like, and we'd all be giving hugs afterwards. And I mean, it just, in those rooms, you're not special.
No. It's leveling the playing field. We are all just people doing our best,
Yeah, and
for the most part.
we all started the same way, and the goal is to finish in a better place.
Yeah. Gosh, that is such a great line.
Yeah, like I mean, which is very contradictory to a lot of things today. But I mean, yeah, you're not special.
Yeah. And it feels good to not be special, right? That takes quite the load off of my shoulders, that I get to just be another person just on this planet, trying to figure out what my purpose is and do my best to fulfill
Yeah,
that. How
exactly.
great is
I'm going to live my life. I've got my health. I've got my family. I've got things. I mean, going from spending my days literally drunk to getting up at 5 in the morning to work out before my kids get up, and then getting their lunches ready for school. And then, I'm the cook of the house too. So I'm, cooking dinner 6, 7 nights a week. And I like to bake as a hobby too. And we do like pizza Fridays. So I'm making like
that? Fun.
sourdough dough from scratch, and like, getting the kids involved. And then I have a garden in the backyard I got to get started for the season. And like, oh, and doing supply chain stuff at the same time. Like, you know, it, filling my time, and also being okay with downtime too. And
Yeah.
that was the hardest part in early recovery, was keeping busy with downtime.
Mhm.
So I'm okay with it now. I'm okay having a lazy day.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where I think I used that time. I was told to stay curious, and that's how I kind of rediscovered some hobbies that I had put down long ago, and some new ones that I had no idea I would enjoy in my adult life. I by far was the youngest person in a bird watching group for about a month, and I just, I needed to be out and about, and I knew if I was going to be out in the woods at 6 o'clock in the morning, I needed to go to bed, and and I looked forward to that, and that was an incredibly fun season of discovery instead of a season of what could have been loneliness if I had chosen that.
And
So
for me, like, food has always been something that's been a passion of mine. My youngest sister used to be a chef, and her husband also used to be a chef. Like, my whole family grew up cooking. Um, like, I was making sourdough before COVID made it cool. Uh,
I love that.
I've got like a 6-year-old starter in my kitchen that I feed like all the time. But it's I remember like drinking and have to prepare meals. Like, okay, I'm going to throw something together. It's still going to come out good, but once I kind of got my shit together again, like, okay, like getting back into it, and just I actually need to kind of reignite that a little bit now, because sometimes now with kids and all that too, it's like, okay, what are we going to make tonight? But it's trying to like just get more creative again and bust out the cookbooks and just
Yeah,
have some fun.
yeah, it is. It is fun if you allow it to be.
It is. And same with growing, like, my parents had a garden as a kid, so I'm continuing that tradition. And now my 5-year-old and 3-year-old love Brussels sprouts.
That is a win as a parent in my
Yes. They don't like sweet potatoes, but they'll ask for more Brussels sprouts, so I'll take the win.
book. Well, Dan, we are coming up on time. This has been such a fun conversation. Before we go, if somebody is curious about sobriety or wants to ask you, more questions, how can they reach you?
I mean, since this is going on LinkedIn, shoot me a note. I mean, I'm happy to continue a conversation with somebody. If people have questions, they want to talk, they're struggling, I'm happy to have a conversation and help someone out, because that's what people did for me. I mean, it's the new era of passing around the meeting booklet and writing your phone numbers on it. Now we're on LinkedIn. So even though this is a professional network, we are professional alcoholics, and we're professional sober people.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I was a great alcoholic till I wasn't. So uh, we all were. Uh, so yeah, if somebody wants to talk, I'm happy to take a message from somebody.
Perfect. Well, you heard him. Reach out on LinkedIn. Dan, it was great having you. And to everybody else, we'll see you next time.